Hey everybody, Tevin here, lead educator with Grow Local South Texas. This is our week 2 session for our Ask Our Educator Q&A. Great question. It's a great time of year to start getting those pollinators in your garden. There really are so many that you can be planting. You know, considering that just about every plant has its own unique flower, you really can kind of go crazy with planting. But if you're looking for plants that are a little bit more specific to pollinators, look for things like milkweed to bring in some of the monarchs. Really any type of basil, something like a Thai basil, or there's African blue basil. Those are fantastic to bring in pollinators. And then really any type of flowers. You really can just kind of go crazy with flowers and just start planting things like borage, sunflowers, nasturtium, Mexican marigold, lantana, hibiscus, zinnia. Maybe try to mix in things like some native plants as well as non-native plants for some diversity. So some biodiversity is going to help when it brings in the pollinators. Some might bring in bees, some might bring in butterflies and other creatures. That will get you going, give you a head start. Great question. So you are right, the time is nearing for the end of our season for getting tomatoes and peppers as the heat rolls in. Fall is going to be the next time. It's going to be great to get those started. But what's nice about the tomatoes and peppers is they both will typically last through the heat as long as they're getting adequate water. So as long as you are taking care of them, maybe putting some mulch around your plants, I would say go ahead and plant what you have if you already have tomatoes and peppers. Get them in the ground now as soon as possible, especially with this cooler weather we've just recently had. This is really going to help them get established before that heat kicks in. And then just like I said, mulch them up really well, make sure they're getting proper water, and you should be successful with them. That's a great question. My recommendation would be to visit your local nurseries. So we have Gills and Turner's here in town. Then we also have Tom from Subtropical Nursery, and he's out of Aransas Pass. And we also have Native Dave's, who's out of Port Aransas, and they both focus on native plants and native trees. They have a variety of different fruit trees, but also citrus trees that are going to grow great all over the coastal bend. So I would recommend maybe reaching out to them. They both are active on social media, as well as you can call them and get some great information when it comes to finding a specific variety that's going to go well in pots. Keep in mind with trees, they do have an extensive root system, so they do like to spread and grow. So keeping them confined to a pot may not be the best option, but if you have a big enough pot, go for it. Give it a try. Maybe try something like a dwarf Mexican lime, or something like a dwarf key lime or something like that is going to stay small and produce some limes in a pot for you. That's great to hear that your tomato plant is so large. That means you're doing something right. It's getting some good nutrients. It's happy where it is. That does happen sometimes with the tomatoes, and it could be partially the climate, partially our heat. You know, they're a little picky sometimes when it comes to the fruiting aspect. They may need a boost of maybe nitrogen or potassium to give them a little bit of a nutrient boost to give towards its fruiting, towards its fruits, so it's tomatoes. Another thing you can do is keeping your tomatoes trimmed. So you asked if you should be trimming them. I would say yes, especially that 6 to 8 inches or 8 to 12 inches off of the ground. So from the ground up, trimming any low-hanging branches or any branches that are kind of hanging down. That is going to not only keep pests off your plants, but also encourage the tomato to want to grow more of the fruits, which are the tomatoes, and kind of dedicate that energy into growing the fruits rather than growing more branches. So if you can kind of trim those up and take out some of that bulk, that should give you a little bit more energy to provide to those tomatoes. Right, great. That's a great question. So I would say as long as you are following your neighborhood guidelines, if your neighborhood has any type of guidelines when it comes to height of your plants or your weeds in your yard, take that in consideration. You don't want to get some type of citation for having outstanding weeds in your yard. But as it goes for city guidelines, to my knowledge, I am not aware of any rules or regulations that say that you cannot have a front yard garden. So even I myself have a partial front yard garden that's visible from the road. I've never had any complaints from neighbors or anyone. What I would recommend in that situation is do the best you can and encourage your neighbors to maybe get involved, maybe harvest some of that food and share it with your neighbors to kind of give them a little explanation of what's going on in your front yard and what you're doing out there, so they know that maybe that food is available for the community if you would like it to be, just to get some more involvement in it and spread the awareness and get yourself your front yard garden thriving and have all your neighbors out there taking pictures and sharing that knowledge with everyone else. I think it's a great tool and something that is, I would say, is very valuable. Okay, so I would recommend what we call scalping. So what you're going to do is grab a shovel or a hoe and start to essentially scrape that top layer of grass off. So then you're just exposing your dirt. While you're at it, you can grab some compost or some ground soil and kind of mix that in to kind of give that area a boost, and then get started planting right in there. Or if you want to prevent that grass from growing back, what you can do is grab, instead of buying something from the store, you could just go get some free cardboard. You might have cardboard laying around at the house. Lay that cardboard down, and then essentially what you'll do is when you're ready to plant, you can essentially poke or kind of cut a little hole into that cardboard and plant right in there. And when you're done planting, what you'll do is get some mulch and spread that on top of your cardboard. So that's going to act as a natural barrier for weeds or anything that may want to grow back. And then it's all going to eventually break back down into soil, and it's all biodegradable. So I think that would probably be the best option, and it's essentially free as long as you have some cardboard on hand. Good question. So for Texas full sun, it's kind of a different story, but there are still a lot of options. I would go with things that you typically will see around here in Corpus Christi. So you do see a lot of like wild sunflowers, but really any type of sunflowers right now are really thriving in the heat. Zinnias. Then we can do some native flowers, so things like lantana, hibiscus. There's an assortment of different types of salvias, basils, Texas sage, Texas wisteria, bachelor buttons, really anything that is drought tolerant or can handle the heat, or water wise they may call it if you're looking at a local nursery. All of those are going to work fantastic. Okay, so that really is going to depend on the type of pests that you are that are bothering and eating your roses. So what I would recommend is maybe take some pictures and do a little bit of research so you can really find out exactly what the creatures are that are eating your roses. Without knowing what type of pests, it's a little bit harder to really decipher the problem there. But what you could do, meanwhile, is make your own natural spray. So you could do a mild detergent mixed with water and kind of just spray that on the foliage to help. And then you could also get a spray that is made for roses. I'm not exactly sure on brands, but if you go to a local nursery, they're going to be able to show you exactly what you may need for roses specifically to kind of help keep pests off that, and something that may be organic or all natural, so you don't have to use any chemicals or pesticides. All right, so for this time of year, it is pretty tough to deal with the bugs. During spring is where all the bugs are kind of coming back to life and reproducing and spreading all over the place. So we have bugs and creatures everywhere. This is probably one of our most frequently asked questions, is how to kind of manage the bug problems. And what I would say is one of your best bets would be wake up early in the morning and really investigate your garden and get hands-on. And any pests you see, just remove those by hand and pick them off and either squish them or toss them away, feed them to the birds, whatever you want to do, relocate them if you don't want to kill them, but just kind of get them out of your garden in a way. So that's really going to make a big difference if you're doing that every day and getting rid of those pests before they have a chance to really dive in and eat your plants. Another thing you could do is, I would say, try companion planting. So finding herbs, so things like rosemary, lemongrass, and there's a few others like marigolds that are natural pest deterrents. So I would recommend companion planting and kind of mixing those around in your garden to have a natural defense for your plants. Finally, you could try a natural repellent. So like we've mentioned before, a mild detergent spray or a neem oil for a natural alternative should at least help. But one of the biggest things, like I said in the beginning, is just getting out there and getting active in your garden and picking those bugs off and getting them away from your plants. So good luck with that.